Uh, hey, I just published my second blog post since. What you doing, Pumpkin? You get changed. Hopefully, it's not going to be a long broadcast, but I do have a guest, someone who I haven't interviewed for a long time, Brian, the ICU nurse from Florida, and I'll be talking about politics and things. I've put up Manchin because Manchin said that he doesn't think the corporate tax rate should be 28%. He'd be more comfortable with 25%. But then other people have pointed out that he supported Obama when Obama proposed lowering the corporate tax rate from 35% to 28%. So previously, Manchin supported 28% corporate tax rate, showing it's all kind of relative to him. And he's essentially just trying to position himself as the person who talks the Democrats down from whatever position they hold. Oh, the link didn't work. Okay, so let me try again. BC News. Right, Brian. Oh, there we go. This one looks more official and should work. Okay, so let me know how that goes. We've got Cosmic Rose, we've got Kimchi, and Brian here. Hello. See how it goes. Did that just work for you, Brian? Did you just get an invite? Because I think I've sent you a broadcast permission, but maybe I need to literally send you something as well. Maybe I will try this. Yes, darling?
Can I use one of the screens while I'm waiting for Daddy?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
All right, let's try this link, Brian. See if it works.
I think I got it.
Oh, there's Brian. Okay. Hello, Brian.
Oh, how's it going?
Good. Long time no see. I like your glasses.
Yeah. Thank you.
How's life in Florida been treating you?
It's been busy. Just work. Our COVID cases are actually down, but we've had a lot of just generally sick people as well. We still are having COVID cases. We still have a COVID unit opened up in my hospital, but they're not operating at capacity currently. They've been operating probably, I would say, 50% or less capacity on any given day.
1 second, my son needs an iPad password. Okay, screen time password. Yep. Is that Daddy's one? Okay. Uh-oh, it is not letting me type in. Oh, now it is. Okay. There you go. Sorry. So yes, you were saying there's one COVID unit still open. It is not as busy as it was before, so COVID cases are falling. There's been some equity issues brought up because I think 60 Minutes did an expose on the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, allowing Publix pharmacies to be the distributors of the vaccine after Publix made a sizable donation. Was it maybe $100,000 or something to Ron DeSantis's campaign coffers? So that's the only thing I've heard about. Did you hear about that 60 Minutes show?
I heard about it, but I didn't get a chance to watch it. I saw a brief synopsis of it, and basically that's about all I know of it as well, too.
Yeah,
but
me too.
It doesn't surprise me, honestly.
No, he does seem very for sale. His morality seemed very for sale during the whole COVID process. But I know that many Republicans were still holding him up as a success story of the pandemic, which seemed fanciful to me. But at the same time, I understood it to potentially be a function of statistical deceit, that is to say, underreporting of COVID, because from what I heard, the excess deaths in Florida, i.e. deaths above the expected numbers of deaths, because deaths tend to be fairly regular unless there's something like a pandemic
something's going on.
Yeah, so the departure from the predictable number of deaths was higher than merely could be accounted for by Florida's official COVID death statistics indicating that maybe deaths were being classified as pneumonia when they were actually comorbid COVID pneumonia, COVID contingent pneumonia. Yes, Kimchi is saying, yes, Florida cooked the numbers. That's how people understand it generally. Cosmic Rose is saying that the audio is very good quality. So that is excellent. She's saying audio and video are fantastic. Good. Hooray. Maybe that's because my children aren't using the internet right now. So that's promising. My daughter's reading. Yay, she's just learnt to read independently, which is such a big deal. So liberating for your children to be able to read their own books, not to say I don't still read to my daughter, because I do. But just the ability to sit down and hunker in a book all by yourself is an awesome life milestone, I think. So how is your family doing as well?
We're doing well. I mean, we're still... I've received, of course, both my vaccinations quite a while ago now.
Yes.
My wife was able to receive both of hers because she's a teacher. So she was able to get both of hers. Both of my parents have been able to receive theirs.
Yes.
Wow. Both my wife's parents have been able to receive theirs. But we've had a hard time getting my wife's grandmother, who lives with us, an appointment to get one for her. And she's in her 80s. So it's it's just been kind of going round and round and round and round with it. So, and I think that has something to do with the county that we're living in versus the county we used to live in.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I moved, I changed counties too. So
yeah, you're not in an as privileged county anymore.
No.
Well, good luck in finding a cancelled appointment or something, because I heard sometimes you can get on wait lists, or even, I'm sure your 80-year-old grandmother-in-law wouldn't necessarily be up for this, but I've heard of people circling around pharmacies in their cars at later parts of the day, so that when they've exhausted their wait list to go through, you're there going, hi, any spare doses? But yeah, that's not really a grandmother-friendly expedition, I guess. Yeah. I just want to notice that Phil just gave us a heart award, super heart award, which flashed up on the screen. It's a HAPS phenomena, which I tend to stop and say hi for that. And somebody called Jeffrey just subscribed. So hello to Jeffrey, the new subscriber, and thanks, Phil. Well, how are other people going with their appointments? Chime in the comments section if you have any commentary about how relatively easy or difficult it's been in your state. I heard that some red states have really struggled with their vaccination rollout, but I'm still going to go ahead and give props overall to the Biden administration. Over 4 million vaccinated in one day. It sounds as if actually having a federal government prepared to take action is key to getting people vaccinated, and therefore key to reinvigorating the economy. Oh, reinvigorating is such a good word. I want to write that down. I haven't seen other people use it as much as I would like them to. And Brian, while you're here, we could look through some stuff together, because I found a thread with some great visualizations to explain the airborne nature of COVID and why increasing air circulation in schools or businesses is so key to reducing COVID outside of vaccinating the population. So I might bring that up on screen and we can share a screen. Give us a sec.
Yeah, I was looking through, there's a site that I found on NPR where they are linking a kind of a map that shows the number of people that are vaccinated in each state and percentages of the population that's vaccinated or who have received their first dose. And there are quite a few states that are like in the lower quarter of this, and the highest percentages are only up to 22% right now. And there's only a handful of states that have reached that level of vaccination. And from everything that I've been reading, most places like Cleveland Clinic are estimating that we need at least 50 to 80% vaccination rate at a minimum to really get to a point where we have collective immunity to be able to make it to where the disease, make it where the disease will no longer spread as much.
Yeah.
I like the term collective immunity versus herd immunity, because herd immunity kind of,
the meaning of it's lost. People have
connotation.
used it in very inappropriate and socially Darwinist kind of ways now. So I wrote it down when you said it, collective immunity, to sort of strengthen the impression that it's just reaching this bulk stage of immunity so much so that it's like a line of football players that forms more of an impermeable barrier to the virus.
I was going back and I was looking at some older articles back when COVID was really hitting hard back earlier in the last year, middle part of last year to the first beginning of last year. And some of the estimates at that point were showing like the R naught value, or the number of people that one person could infect, was as high as 5 to 8 people, depending on the article I was looking through. And now, with a combination of different things like masking, social distancing, more people getting the vaccine itself, that number has dropped down now to somewhere between 1.4 and 3.9, depending on the data you're looking at. So that in and of itself is good. The R naught's going down just because of some of the things that we've instituted and the fact that the vaccines are rolling out.
So the combination, the multifactorial nature of mask wearing, social distancing, and at least part of the population getting vaccinated. So those are all good things. We're still racing against time against the variants, which are more contagious and more infective. Oh, actually, I'm repeating myself. More infective and also more dangerous in and of themselves. Let me just bring up on screen the droplet thing that I wanted to share. Let's see. Might get rid of us, actually. And then, so we can just see this full screen for a minute. It's 1 minute long, I think.
When we talk about droplet transmission, this is what we mean. Really large droplets that fall to the ground in a relatively short distance. When we talk about aerosol transmission, we're talking about really small aerosols that fill a room or fill an indoor space relatively quickly. And so if you have an enclosed space with really poor airflow, those aerosols are going to fill up that room. When you open the door to that room, they may actually leave and go into that space as well. Until we recognise the importance of aerosol spread and we don't put control measures in place, then we are setting ourselves up for continued failure.
Okay. Oops. And me. And not that one. All right. So she was just an occupational, what's her profession described as? I could tell she's not a occupational hygienist. There you go. Her sentence kind of ran astray, as my sentences sometimes do, just towards the end of what she was saying. She said, if we, hang on, what did she say?
We are setting ourselves, don't put control measures in failure aerosol spread, and we don't
if we don't recognize the importance and significance of aerosol spread. So I just loved that she used a spray bottle to highlight that large droplets fall to the floor quickly. So with COVID, it was initially thought, if you have people sneezing or coughing, stop that and you've reduced transmission. But it became more and more pressingly evident that aerosol, fine droplets that can come out just when you breathe or talk or sing, and are not just produced when you full on expel air quickly from your respiratory system through the propulsive zeal of a cough or a sneeze. It could just be a lower grade expulsion of talking, and that creates a fine mist of COVID smoke, if you will, that can hang in the air and that can stay. And that's why
it becomes aerosolized in particles that are small enough to stay suspended in the air.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So when we say airborne, they mean aerosolized, i.e. small things. So then Eric Fagel-Ding, or I'll just call him Dr. Ding, perhaps, he's showing a graph from a study about what happens in a restaurant setting where they identified some people getting infected. So people were infected even though there was no close contact between them and there was no shared contaminated object, like they didn't all touch the same kettle or something. So the scientific term for infected objects that have viral particles on them, that's called Fomite Transmission, Fomite being an object with infected particles on it. So they say, yep, it was definitely airborne transmission because there were no observed sharing of items. So here is a picture of people who were infected. If you can see that the people who are colored in red are the people who were infected from an exposure at a restaurant. And you can see the pathway of air circulation. And then the infection risk was also higher for patrons at the zone tables in red. Okay, let's have a look at the red tables. Actually, they're not red tables, it's just red air currents drawn around. All right. And then somebody's got a graph of what it looks, not a graph, a GIF of what it looks like in American cafeterias when everybody gathers to eat. And they're all in very close contact. So Eric's saying that there needs to be more ventilation and CDC approved air disinfection. Do you have any air disinfection measures that you could tell us about at your hospital where you're working?
In our ICU, they installed air scrubbers in every single one of our rooms, which actually are basically, think of them as like big exhaust fans, but they actually have HEPA filters built into them. And then they create a negative pressure in the room. So they suck out so much air that even if you were to leave the door wide open, it's whatever's in that room is not going to come out of the room. It's going to actually get sucked out through that exhaust and caught up in the filter. And those filters are changed. I believe they're good for a month, and our building services come by every month and change out those filters.
Yeah. All right, I'm bringing up another graph now, which is Eric pointing out that in December it was being reported on as well that there was transmission within restaurants. There was a teenager who became infected after 5 minutes of exposure from less than 20 feet away. And at that time he was saying, we can't just use this 2 meter or 6 feet standard of social distancing because indoor dining just not safe. This was a schematic diagram of an outbreak in a restaurant equipped with ceiling type air conditioners. The arrowed solid streamlines represent the airflow directions in the restaurant. Curved air streamlines represent that air streams from the ceiling air conditioners are reflected from the wall or barrier and move downward towards the floor. Okay, so bouncing against the wall and then moving down to the floor. And then there were some red dots to indicate that this teenager, greater than 20 feet away, was infected after 5 minutes of exposure. So basically, just if you're in a room and there's no open windows and people aren't wearing masks, there's a higher risk of transmission, particularly if you're in a community where there's high rates of transmission at a community level. I mean, people in nations that have pursued zero COVID strategies, that have tried to eliminate COVID, that have had sharp lockdowns and other measures of mitigation against the disease, to not just live alongside it, but to actively try and drive it out of their communities. Those places, people can now once again dine in restaurants or go to sporting activities. New Zealand, their population is living its best life, as is most places in Australia, there are periodically sharp lockdowns when they find an outbreak in order to just make sure everybody in that community stays put until they've isolated who has the disease and who has to definitely stay home until they're not contagious in any way, shape, or form anymore. So that's good that your hospital has HEPA filters, and I hope that it's part of Biden's package. I know there was some various billions devoted to school reopening, so I'm hoping that some of that money is going towards fans and air scrubbers or air cleaners to help make those environments safer for children. And not just safer for children, safer for the communities that those children may infect, because even if children have mild cases of COVID, they definitely can be vectors for carrying that disease, which, as we know, can carry risk of long-term disability or long COVID, as well as the risk of death. What about you, Brian? Because you're a parent as well as an ICU nurse. Do you know of any modifications being made in your children's schools?
I do know that the particular school that my oldest goes to had some very serious modifications. They actually removed a lot of stuff out of their classrooms in order to space out their desks. Still probably not quite 6 feet, but as best as they can. The teachers are very strict about masks. Masks have to stay above the nose, all that kind of stuff, because if you're wearing your mask here, it's not doing you any good in the first place. So they're very strict about it there, which is good. I know that there was an email that they had sent out that they had received some funds for doing some upgrading to their air conditioning. So I'm assuming that is probably installing HEPA filters, maybe some type of UV disinfection, because I know some places are doing that as well. That's a very expensive undertaking, though. UV disinfection is very expensive. We use, anytime a patient leaves a room, whether they're discharged or they expire or whatever happens, they're transferred. At our hospital, we actually have a UV disinfecting system that goes in the room and stays in there for, it sends off like infrared signals around the room to figure out how big the room is, how much stuff's in the room, and it has a calculation as to how long it has to stay on. So anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the room, what's in the room, this UV light stays on in that room to totally disinfect everything in the room.
It's like a Roomba for air disinfection.
Basically, yeah, but it disinfects all surfaces because it's blasting the entire room with UV. We have, I believe, I was talking with somebody from the Environmental Services Department. He said that we have 4 of those things now in our hospital, and I'm a small hospital. We only have 200 beds at the hospital that I work at. And we have 4 of those things, and they cost about $70,000 a piece. So they're not cheap, but anytime you add a little label that says hospital grade on it, it jacks the price up in the United States anyway. So
it's like weddings.
Yeah.
It's got a high social premium on it because it's very valued.
Exactly.
I just realized I haven't checked out the comment section for a while. So Cosmic Rose said that she's hearing about the large percentage of countries that have 0 vaccinations, and the variants will possibly run rampant in those countries with the unvaccinated and could prolong the pandemic around the world. Yes, so I think people are arguing that rich countries need to do more in a self-protective, non-altruistic way. Help other countries vaccinate their populations as well. And I think that's something that will potentially happen, because I think the Biden administration understands that, but they need to get to a point of political comfort where people go, okay, they've had a really good shot at vaccinating all of the Americans that will readily consent to vaccination. And I am a little sad that they're backing away from the idea of a vaccine passport, because to my understanding, consequences can help with people who are on the fence about whether they will or they won't get vaccinated, and people who tend to that bias of doing nothing. So if they're a little bit confused about the benefits of being vaccinated over having a risk of getting COVID or long-term COVID or dying from COVID, that they might just choose to take no action because that's the default position when you're scared or confused. So I'm a little sad about that, but at the same time, I believe in the political instincts of the Biden administration. And if they've made that political calculation to think it'll alienate too many people or it'll make people more stubborn if there are vaccine passports, then, well, I hope that that's based on good calculations, because I think we're not up to the point yet where vaccination holdout is a big problem, because people are still, the bigger, more obvious problem is still trying to get a vaccination to everyone who wants one, to make that available. But yes, when do you think it'll become a problem? The probably 30% of Americans who are sufficiently brainwashed or propagandized that they think there's a microchip, or that it will be ruinous for them potentially if they get a vaccine.
Well, I'd like to say that my microchip has improved my 5G coverage on my phone, which is great. So, I mean, there's always a plus side to everything.
That's good audio today. It's all thanks to your vaccination and your 5G chips. That's awesome.
Exactly. So, but no, I think that, I mean, there's always going to be those people out there that your conspiracy theorists, your far right wing groups that are just going to blast anything that they can say from the highest mountaintop to whoever's going to listen to them. That's never going to change. But I think that the majority of people understand that getting a vaccination and having enough people vaccinated that we can get this under control is really what this is all about. And I've seen numerous people on Twitter. I saw somebody today, and I actually commented on their post. They're having a hard time getting a vaccine in their city, wherever they're at. And I didn't ask them where they were or anything, but I just kind of left some words of encouragement. I said, from my viewpoint, looking at that and seeing, because I've seen this multiple times, multiple people saying this. From my viewpoint, seeing that is kind of like the silver lining of the issue, because from my viewpoint, it's a possibility of seeing fewer and fewer people come into the hospital and dying of this. Where it may be an inconvenience now. I mean, keep trying. Eventually, you will find some place that you can get the vaccine. You will be able to get it.
Yeah, there's a bottleneck
not giving up
of high demand, but the 4 million vaccination rate a day is something that if the Biden administration can keep up or even intensify, that's such a good outcome for the US, and that will enable your economy to reopen, because it was never lockdowns that shuttered America's economy. It was well-founded fear of dying, surrounded by people who were dying and suffering from significant illness and disability and brain fog and shortness of breath and elevated temperatures, even for weeks after potentially recovering a bit. So all of those things.
We actually have, you said, you brought up something, you said something, and it kind of spurred my brain. We've had patients that have come back in that have recovered from COVID, that come back in with lung issues, with breathing issues, things like that. And they have this sense of like a fogginess to their mentation. And a lot of the doctors are we don't call it this on like in the chart or in the paperwork or anything, but they're calling it COVID brain.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an effect that it's had on these people, where the long-term anoxic blood going to the brain has caused these issues
of the brain of oxygen. Yeah. So it's got cognitive impairment effects, leaving people with the inability to concentrate and really impairing their ability to hold down a job, I would imagine as well, because, you know, regardless of who you are or your training or your credentials, if your brain is not functioning at capacity, if you're struggling to think because your brain's been deprived of oxygen and you can't just heal from that when the virus is gone from your body, that's depleted your brain to just rapidly neurally fire as it needs to. That's going to impair a significant number of people.
And the one thing with children that have gotten the disease, they haven't seen this as much in any children that have had severe cases of COVID, because the child's brain is more plastic still has a lot of plasticity to it, and it can reintegrate different neural nodes and things like that a lot easier than the adult brain can. The adult brain, by the time you're 25, is pretty much done creating all of its interconnections. You start
we have
breaking
more
those
crystalline
down.
intelligence, and they have more fluid intelligence, so they can be more responsive to new things, but they can also respond more to being deprived of oxygen in a way that heals it and addresses the impairment. Addresses the impairment. So that's interesting. So children may have a neuroplasticity that is protective from long-term COVID cognitive impairment, COVID-related cognitive impairment. Mental fog, COVID brain, as they call it. MJ refers to them as long haulers, or people who are still struggling with a long-term, what seems to be a long-term disability that's COVID-related. Cosmic Rose is noting that they may have had those UV cleaners at the White House, but we haven't got confirmation of that. Jeff is here. Hello, Jeff. And I don't know what HVAC is. Brian, do you know what HVAC is?
Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning.
Oh, that's what it means. Okay.
Yeah.
And Phil notes that the Texas governor has already fabricated a scapegoat for when COVID spreads. Immigrants. Now, I shoved the word fabricated in there, Phil, because I am so keen on making it linguistically clear, putting as many linguistic signposts in as I can, that when Republicans do this type of thing, it's not true. It's not based on truth. So you can have a scapegoat who's someone who may be partially guilty of a crime, and you overemphasize their guilt in order to create a scapegoat. But this one is made up in that immigrants to the United States are getting COVID testing. They are being tested for COVID, and they're being let in if they are negative on a COVID test. So there's no truth to that idea that COVID spread relates to migration. It is entirely a result of the relaxation of mitigation strategies like social distancing and mask mandates that Governor Abbott dropped, because Republicans are sabotaging America's recovery. And we know now that this sabotage relates to both public health and the economy, because when you sabotage public health, you sabotage the economy. And they were falsely dichotomized into a choice of choose the economy, choose to just live with the virus and say, if they die, they die. It is what it is. That was this false binary choice framed in that way wickedly by the Trump administration, who wanted to burnish their fabricated, their entirely false, unsubstantiated credentials as economic managers. So we're good for the economy. We want to open everything up. We understand that some people might die, but we want the businesses to live, in the hope that enough voters would say, oh, well, that's what's needed, because we need our jobs to survive, and we can't just risk things on the hope of keeping grandma alive. If grandma dies, she dies. If all of the black and brown-skinned people employed in essential industries, essential services die, they die, and we can't risk our jobs for that. That was always a false choice. And in fact, people lose their jobs because of the way the virus was allowed to ravage America without appropriate without responsible action being taken by the federal government at the time, which was the Trump administration. So, yes, bad Texas governor. People were posting today pictures of a ball game with a full crowd. And people were sarcastically saying, oh, Texas has apparently eliminated COVID. And I would say we've got to call it out. The Texan governor is purposefully encouraging the spread of COVID, presumably to make it less obvious how much of a better job Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are doing than the Trump-Pence administration.
Yeah, Abbott has done a horrible job. So has DeSantis. And you follow any of the Republican governors, they're still following suit to what Trump was doing when Trump was in office. And like you said, it's almost like he's trying to sabotage what good work Biden and Harris are doing against the pandemic by opening everything back up. Yeah. And I have noticed that here more too. Just walking into a store, just stopping somewhere to get something. They'll have a sign on the door that says mask mandatory, but you walk in, half the people in there aren't wearing masks. The employees aren't wearing masks. I still wear a mask everywhere I go. I've been vaccinated for several months now, and I still wear a mask everywhere I go because I can still catch the virus and still spread it. And I don't want to bring it home to my family. My kids aren't vaccinated. They can't get vaccinated. My wife's grandmother hasn't been vaccinated yet, and we still can't get her a spot yet. So it's just one of those things that I see people easing up on their own restrictions as well, even different employers and things like that. And there was a store here specifically that I went to a while back. It was a bike shop. And I needed to get a inner tube for one of my kids' bikes, and it's right around the corner. It's great. It's convenient. So I went in there, and they have a sign that says masks are not mandatory in this store, but we will put one on if you feel more comfortable. I decided to just walk out of there and go to a different store. I drove down the street to the Walmart Supercenter and got an inner tube from there. Versus walking into the store where all these people haven't been wearing masks all day.
You've been breathing, it's airborne, and aerosol droplets linger in the air.
Putting your mask on as soon as I walk in the door doesn't clean the air. So
it's important to note. That reminds me of something else I wanted to progress to. Oh, there's a 1-minute video where they've done a compilation highlighting that point that we're just making about airborne transmission.
Ebola and this are not the same. Ebola is lousy. This is airborne. Corona is airborne. It's more contagious.
Wow, this video packs a lot in it. Just pointing out that states with higher use of mask mandates are experiencing lower incidence of COVID. It's a good video, but there's a lot to unpack in it. Okay, so that's the end of that video. Was there anything that you saw there? Probably hard for people to see on their phones or their videos. I'm trying to find this this Japanese video where they filled a room with smoke. They filled a room with smoke and clearly used not ultraviolet light, something. Oh, here we go. I found it. Okay, this is really visually striking to show how having a fan and how just taking precautions really clears a room of aerosol level droplets. Check this out. Japan apparently assumed it was airborne from the very beginning, hence their focus on mask culture and okay. So this is when there's two doors diagonally opposite from each other and they're both open, and this is to see how quickly this smoke with some type of fast forward, it takes only 7 minutes to clear all the smoke out of a room with two doors open, but 45 minutes with only one door open. So then they put in a fan and reduce the amount of time that it takes to clear
扇風機を少し内側に入れて、部屋の空気を
aerosol
外に出
size
す。
droplets out of the room. I think that reduces it to 23 minutes. And then they put in, so look, it's the door at the fan at the door of the room is sucking in that air and then blowing it out. And then here is something called an air circulator. So I wonder how much they cost. They would cost less than your $70,000 UV sterilizer, air scrubber, but could just be good for changing the air that's in a room or new air. So they managed to reduce it to 12 minutes, which is good. So two doors open, 7 minutes to get all the aerosol sized droplets out of a room, and 12 minutes with it. What did you think of that, Brian? Did you enjoy what they did there with the luminescent aerosol representation?
Yeah, it looks very good because it's something that's visual that people can see, and especially giving timelines, letting people know that, hey, this is how long it takes to clear out a room. When you think about that as think of that room as the restaurant, and that front door, which is opening however many times in a given time that you're sitting there eating a meal. It's not open the entire time. So how long does it take the air in the room that you're in while you're sitting there eating to get out? Probably a lot longer than 45 minutes because that door is not constantly open.
I'd love it if they did a representation of mapping out a same amount of square size space and also spraying that luminescent smoke into an outdoor space, and then also using that type of camera, although how easy would that be? But anyway, just seeing how quickly the turbulence of being outdoors disperses smoke, because it's much faster as well. That's like that's everything is an open door at that point. But just to highlight how much safer it is outdoors. So obviously those packed baseball games are still a concern because you can get infected in as little as 5 minutes. So you're still potentially getting exposed to infective doses if you're sitting near someone with COVID, if you're sitting right next to somebody else at a ballpark, in a stadium. But yes, outside still infinitely preferable to inside, although once you've got a concentration of that many people, yes, you are increasing the risk just that somebody present is infected with COVID unwittingly, because a lot of transmission is still done by people who are completely unaware that they're infected.
Yeah, and there will always be asymptomatic carriers of any disease, and that's where everybody always wearing a mask comes in handy, because even if you're asymptomatic and your body fights it off, if you were wearing a mask the whole time while you're asymptomatic, you might have never spread it to one person. Whereas if you're feeling fine and you think, oh, I don't need a mask, and you're going out and you're breathing on everybody, now there's no telling how many people you possibly could have infected, even though you never felt bad.
Yeah.
And we recently had a patient. This is a fairly sad story, but he had received his first dose of the vaccination. He was due to get his second dose this past weekend. He died the day before his second dose would have been due of COVID pneumonia because he thought that after having had the first dose, he would have had he was safe enough at that point.
Yep.
Is exactly what his wife said. He thought he was safe enough.
Yep.
And he went out, wasn't wearing a mask anymore, contracted COVID, and it hit him very, very hard.
And people also tend to mistakenly think that they're protected the minute they get that vaccination dose as well, whereas the vaccination is a brilliant scientific invitation to your body to develop antibodies, and it does need some time and space to develop adequate antibodies to be able to fight off that disease. So that's really unfortunate. All the deaths that occur in this time period where we know we have the vaccines, they're in the process of being distributed. It's awful. It's awful for people to relax their guard. And I'm glad we're doing this broadcast to be part of the collection of responsible people asking people to not let their guard down precipitately, to not throw away their mask because they've got one dose of the vaccination. Yes, you're lucky. Hooray for you getting one dose. Wait for your second dose and wait for a period for your body. What is the recommended period, Brian? Do you think? Is it 1 or 2 weeks?
All the literature I've seen says that it is anywhere between 12 and 14 days after your second dose for your body to build up enough antibodies to be considered immune.
Yeah. So I'm gonna start loosely saying 2 weeks, 12 to 14 days, round up to 2 weeks to just feel safe, because of course, when there's still high levels of community transmission in your community, that's challenging your body more, or putting your body through greater risk of literally being exposed to the disease. So keep up the mask wearing, because it's not as if America's anywhere near high levels of collective immunity yet, high enough to bring that community transmission rate down to where it needs to be, that you can start feeling more footloose and fancy free with your lives. There's still this risk, and the people who encourage the community to throw away their masks and to go and resume normal life, they are being irresponsible, even in the absence of Trump. And to me, it's that kind of bad behavior that people get stuck into when they're trying to conceal their bad behavior. So I would imagine those Republican governors that are misbehaving, that sounds too childish, and I don't want to infantilize them, that are behaving irresponsibly, behaving disrespectfully towards human life in their states, that they are trying to cover up the fact that they behaved irresponsibly before by continuing to perpetrate the myth that COVID is not such a big deal. Or at least now they're trying to subvert that myth into being COVID is a product of foreignness. COVID is related only to the actions of the Chinese government and to the actions of migrants from other countries. And it only exists in the context of a massive appetite of some Americans for lies. Their appetite for lies about other people is a big downside to that version of nationalism, which says we're the best. We can't do any wrong. If there's wrongness in the world, if there's bad in the world, it's because the other people did it. You can just see the self-destructiveness of that willingness to put blinders on with regards to the actions of your own government, if it's your own tribe in power. So it's not even just nationalism, it's Republican nationalism. So a Republican president clearly did no wrong. He didn't mismanage COVID. It's all just the fact of the Chinese government having a 12-day delay in telling the world. How much delay? There was probably at least a month delay. I haven't got my head around the chronology of it that well. I know the Chinese government was not transparent in an ideal way. I know they fined a doctor for spreading untruths because he endeavored to bring the public's attention to the fact that there was this mysterious pneumonia-like disease that was disabling people in his hospital. He was an ophthalmologist, I think. He treated eye diseases, and he was a whistleblower, and he died, but not after being fined by the police. And the Chinese government, I think, eventually rescinded that official rebuke that he was given. And oh, look, we have Pablo's just dropped by. He's one of the HAPS team, and he dropped by with an Appreciate Award and said hello from Los Angeles. So thank you, Pablo. Nice to feel
Hello,
seen. And Phil has a question for you, Brian, which is, how old was he? Did he have underlying conditions?
He had no underlying health conditions. The only medical history he had was a facelift. That was it. Very healthy. Ran 3 to 5 miles a day. Biked 15 to 20 miles on other days. Very active individual. Had been retired for several years. Was in his mid-60s. Retired early. So, I mean, he never was a smoker, never was a drinker, didn't have diabetes, anything. He was probably one of the most healthy people I've seen die of COVID, honestly.
Yeah. Just so people know that there is that risk. Like, we always want to be able to assuage our own anxiety and to say it's other people who this happens to. But I think Democrats or people on the left side of politics, or the moderate left side of politics, have been able to respond rationally to the threat of this disease and accept that it doesn't just impact elderly people, it doesn't just impact people with pre-existing conditions. It has the potential to impact relatively young people as well as middle-aged and elderly people. So particularly the new variants, people have been saying that the average ages of people admitted to hospital is getting younger, and that's not just a function of more elderly people being vaccinated. It's a function of the new variant being more debilitating to even younger people. So I think that's an important cautionary tale that you've shared with us, Brian, about that patient who died, who thought he could afford to take off his mask because of having received the first vaccination. So thank you for sharing that story. I wrote it down to just remind myself, because we all need to recognize it takes work to maintain a cautious mindset, to maintain the precautionary principle in our behavior. The human mind is attracted to conserving energy, attracted to conserving effort where possible. So no wonder if leaders you trust say, don't worry about COVID, or only worry about migrants having COVID. No wonder they lean into that if those are the people they trust. So thank you to Democratic leaders who have done the opposite, and praise be that there are Democratic leaders in power right now, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, etc., people who are saying the right things. But even people with good intentions sometimes give away too much hope too quickly. So the CDC, the current CDC director, I think her name is Dr. Rochelle Walensky, she was saying that studies had illustrated that vaccinations entirely curtailed the risk of transmitting the disease, because people had said, look, it's well established that there's zero hospitalizations and death amongst the cohort of people who've been vaccinated. So if you're vaccinated, you've had 2 doses, your 14-day period has elapsed, so your body's built up antibodies, you've had a chance to do that, you have very little chance of being hospitalized or dying from COVID. But there wasn't such robust evidence that you didn't even contract the virus at all. Like, maybe you had a mild version of the virus, so maybe it would still be possible to transmit it. There's a chance. So she too blithely wrote off that chance, and then 2 days later walked it back. So it took 2 days of people saying, no, please don't give people that false confidence yet. The data does not justify that. It is not necessarily true that immunized people will not be able to transmit the disease at all. So yes, even people trying their hardest to accurately communicate scientific information can still mess up and then have to fix their miscommunications. So I'm going to keep contributing to sharing good information as I come across it. Thank you, Brian, for being on this broadcast tonight. How are you going with your own broadcast? Do you have time to do it? I guess you've just started playing with HAPS as a platform. How's that going?
Yeah, I just started playing with HAPS today. I was kind of like in I guess it's like a before you go live mode, I guess.
Oh, yep. So you can see how
everything looks. I was kind of playing around with like trying to bring up web pages and stuff like that. So I haven't really messed with it too much. Because I don't know, about 2 months ago, I finally got a new computer. So that's what I'm on now. I'm on my computer right now. So I figured,
it's
okay,
an
let me sit
excellent computer,
down.
Brian. It's great transmissibility. Transmissibility. Great video quality.
Yeah, it's an iMac. It's a nice computer. So.
Oh, an iMac. I put that on my wish list.
Yeah, but I guess HAPS is not as compatible with Safari browser, so it told me that I had to use Chrome. It's more compatible with Chrome. So I did open up Chrome. I do have Chrome on my computer, but I don't normally use it. I normally use Safari for everything, but it seems to be working pretty well. I'm going to try and start broadcasting a little bit more. I need to get some more information out. Like I said, I was digging up some stuff today, just looking at different, some data that I haven't really had time to look at in a while. Just the vaccination rates across the different states and stuff like that. Who's doing better? What states are doing better? And everything I'm seeing so far is like your Democratic states are doing much better than the Republican states as far as getting number of people vaccinated. The vaccine rates for people getting both doses are higher in those states as well, because there's going to be a certain percentage of people that never go back for their second dose. That's one of the good things about the Johnson and Johnson.
That it's a one-dose vaccine.
That it's a
we need to give
vaccine.
that to Republican states. The Biden administration should do that. Of course, then there might be complaints from people in those states that say they don't appreciate the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Although from what I see, it's a great vaccine. It still has 0% or 100% avoidance of hospitalization and death.
Hospitalizations, yeah. And some of the most recent work with, and I think you touched on this in one of your broadcasts the other day, was some of the most recent work and some of the studies in children are showing, I think it's Pfizer is showing that it's working very well in children between 12 and 15. And 12 and 6, I thought it was 16 or 17. Yeah. So that's promising as well, because I mean, one of my kids is within that age range.
That's fantastic.
So see how that goes. And I hope that more and more data comes out, because it's a very limited group too. It's only about 2,800 participants, I think, in the one Pfizer study that they're doing right now. So I think they need to open that up a little bit more, get some more numbers, get some more data, because 2,700 people sounds like a lot. But when you're looking at vaccinating tens of millions of people, it's a drop in the bucket. It really is.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. I think I've heard that Pfizer has been doing well with the variants to also show a strong protective effect against the COVID variants that are of concern still, because of how fast they spread and how seriously they impact people. So the South African variant, the Brazil variant, and the UK variant are all of concern. So yes, with any luck, people will keep up their precautionary behavior. And what else do I have to say? I said I was going to talk about Joe Manchin and jobs and the press secretary, Jen Psaki. So I'll do a conclusionary statement that just at least touches on those topics that I promised to talk about. I'll say that the infrastructure bill seems so promising and does so much to highlight the pro-social nature of democratic policy making, that it seeks to benefit people from all states, regardless of their voting bent, be it blue or red. So many rural red, politically red areas would benefit from an infrastructure package that brings broadband connection, that invests in the type of infrastructure you need for internet access for every household, even in remote rural areas, and that would increase educational prospects and job opportunities and ability to enroll online or sign up for benefits or sign up to get an immunization appointment. And somebody called Social says Biden's infrastructure plan, too small, need more. That would be a great comment if you understood the challenges of getting through any pro-social legislation in the face of obdurate Republican behavior. That is to say, stubborn, obstructive bullshit from Republicans. So Joe Manchin needs to be in a position where he will still vote with Democrats and is able to make at least a show of talking the Democrats down a bit from their ambitious plans. So yes, sure, AOC has come out and said we need a $10 billion infrastructure plan instead of a $2.5 billion infrastructure plan. And it's like, yeah, there's ambition and then there's being completely devoid from reality. So if we try and stay tethered to reality, we'll acknowledge that a $2.5 trillion rescue infrastructure plan would be awesome for America and would go a long way to undoing some of the damage done by successive, well, not successive, but small government Republicans and their insistence on low tax rates and depriving infrastructure that's critical to the well-being of the American people: roads, bridges, airports, trains, transport, but also public hospitals, all manner of infrastructure things that need restoration and extension. So, yep, Joe Manchin apparently has a pattern of negotiating down, but then he'll vote with the Democrats. And people laugh at him saying he controls the Senate or he's trying to control the Senate. Yep, that's the practical reality of life in America. People in rural areas have a disproportionate amount of control on American governance. Sorry, Brian, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, if we just take 10% of the military budget and put that towards infrastructure, we would have money falling out of our ears.
Yes. Yes.
Because they spent $700 billion last year, over $700 billion on the military.
Yeah, and they're very difficult to audit. They resist being audited, and when they are audited, there's like, oh yeah, we can't account for some of the trillions of dollars that have been spent on the military, some of the billions of dollars that have been spent on the military. So we know that's a problem, but we also know that military spending presses an emotional button of safety for Republican voters, and you can't mess with a safety button because it's a big need on the pyramid of needs. Is it Maslow? Who made a
hierarchy of needs?
Yeah, that one.
So safety being at the being the biggest ones.
Yeah, safety is the biggest one. And so Republicans and Democrats perceive safety differently, but Republicans still carry a disproportionately large influence on American politics because of the way the system is organized, because of Republicans getting to add 6 states to the Senate to the system of counting American states in 1889 and 1890. So I can list them. I found this article in The Atlantic. Congress added North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Washington, Idaho, and Wyoming, the largest admission of states since the original 13. And this addition of 12 new senators and 18 new electors to the Electoral College was a deliberate strategy of late 19th century Republicans to stay in power, even after their swing towards big business cost them a popular majority. And that strategy paid dividends deep into the future. Indeed, the admission of so many rural states back then helps to explain GOP control of the Senate for so long. So this article was written a while ago when the Republican Party did have control of the Senate. It was written in 2019. So Democrats now have a narrow minority control of the a narrow majority, control of the Senate, but Joe Manchin is effectively at least half Republican because he's from West Virginia. He represents West Virginia, and that's a very thin majority he has that would very easily swing to a Republican Senate candidate, which means the Senate is still almost slightly controlled by Republicans still. So that's still something America has to contend with. Once Washington, D.C. is added as a state and the 700,000 people who live there get actual democratic representation at a state level, that could change the balance of power and make it easier to do good for the American people. But isn't that interesting in historic terms, Brian, that in 1889, Republicans had swung towards catering to big businesses and they'd lost votes as a consequence. So it's like this pro-corporate bias that damaged Republicans then, but they found a workaround to still maintain political control that their actual policy positioning didn't merit. So they chose to add 6 more states to the total of American states in order to maintain that control outside of any sort of standard democratic functioning. They rigged the system, as it were. Yeah, they did. That's what they did. Very, very long-term consequences of that action.
And they added states that are basically land masses. There's hardly any people in most of those states. As compared to
people that are there are people that owned or are connected in some way to agricultural industries that previously derived profit from chattel slavery, which means they may have a nostalgia for that system of profiting from enslaved Black Americans, or they may have resentment for the changing dynamic of American life since the civil rights movement of Reconstruction and then the 1960s. All that period of time will be filled with white agricultural grievance of people who owned land and who generated profit from enslaved people tending to farms.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I wrote a blog post about it. Guys, it's on davcat43.com. It's not a work of art. I'm just mostly showcasing the work of other people that I think is really important to read. But I'm just so proud of myself for typing and then hitting publish. Alan's joined us. Hello, Alan. How are you today? Nice to see you. We've got Sheldon as well. Hello, Sheldon. Lovely to see you too. Sheldon notes we must diffuse the filibuster. Very true. Manchin and Sinema will need to be on board for that. In the meantime, the Senate parliamentarian, who's supposedly a nonpartisan person who helps interpret the rules of the Senate, she has given the Democrats leave to include 2 more bills in that whole circumvent the filibuster thing that comes with what's reconciliation? You know, that process where you can just get a simple majority of 51 votes and you can still pass legislation, and you can use that in conjunction with budgets, and you can do it once a year. Well, the Senate parliamentarian is saying, I'll count that as still within your allotment for the year. You can have 2 more bills that are connected to the budget. That's my understanding at the moment of that. So that's really good news, meaning that the Democrats can do more good for the American public. So it means most of the obstacles now in the path of American functionality is the Republican Party trying to sabotage democracy by passing bills in all manner of states that restrict access to voting and make Black Americans jump through various hoops in order to be able to vote, which is unconscionable, racist, but also fundamentally anti-democratic. It's easy to target Black American voters to make life harder for them because, A, there's a demographically reduced likelihood that particularly older Black Americans will have been born in a hospital. They're more likely to have been born outside of a hospital due to the costs of being born in a hospital. So less likely to have those official birth certificates, less likely to own a car, and therefore less likely to have a driver's license. If you live in a predominantly Black community, there's also less likely or there's a lower statistical likelihood of having a DMV in your neighborhood for you to easily be able to turn up and get a driver's license. Yes. Oh, Dav, Cosmic Rose is reminding me of the reconciliation word. Yes. Shell Lady has just given us a high award as well. Can I put it on screen? Thank you for that. Christopher's here too. Everybody's here. Look at that. All right, so I think, Jen Psaki. I haven't paid tribute to Jen Psaki yet. Somebody, a journalist, asked her about a secret memo that's going around accusing the Biden administration of undercosting their infrastructure bill, saying that there was an extra $1 trillion there. So when they said it was 2.5, somebody had done the maths and said that it was really 3.5, was going to cost 3.5 million. And Jen Psaki just said, oh, okay, well, we've been very transparent in our costings, so I would encourage you all to get out your calculators and add that up for yourselves. And compare it to the findings of the secret mysterious memo. So that was a beautiful bit of putting a journalist in his place, which I'm going to celebrate because I want to hold the media accountable for how quickly they're working with the Republican goal of glossing over the insurrection and all of the harm that the Republican president and the Republican cronies and the Republican governors did to America over the last year. So I don't want that swept under the carpet in favor of manufacturing scandals based on secret memos. Not anybody who's prepared to put their name, not any economist prepared to put their name to an accusation. So thank you, Jen Psaki. We really appreciate a press secretary who stands up for good governance. Cosmic Rose notes that the DMV licenses are not free in most states. Yeah, I would imagine they're not free. So yes, otherwise it's a poll tax, which is illegal. True. Poll taxes are anti-democratic because they try to disenfranchise people for being poor. If you can't pay this sum of money, well, then you don't deserve to vote. Yes. There must be a subset of Republicans who were concerned about what happened under Trump. Maybe they voted for Biden in 2020, or maybe they considered it. Maybe they had some concerns about the very blatant inconsistencies in Trump's public health messaging. I think Trump managed to put some people off in the Republican Party. I think he managed to freak out some Republican voters with his whole inject bleach thing. And I think the evidence of that lies in the fact that out of the 50 most educated counties in the US, 45 of them went for Biden.
That's not surprising to me, honestly.
Yeah. But I think we should get somebody to compare that to what happens in other years when there hasn't been a pandemic that's been grotesquely mismanaged. To say that some educated Republicans, white college-educated Republicans who would normally vote in favor of their wallet, vote in favor of tax minimization politicians, voted for Biden because they understood that it would ruin the economy to continue having dysfunctional, corrupt people in power. And they could see that corruption evident in Trump's ham-fisted approach of alternating between calling himself a wartime president because of COVID to also then telling people that bleach might be a good, or that disinfectant might cleanse the lungs. Yeah. So, Marsha's here too. Hello, Marsha. Thanks for dropping in. I think I'm just about to end the broadcast. I've been on for an hour longer than I thought. I thought I was just going to do a really quick 15-minute broadcast, but it was very lovely to talk to Brian again. I'm so grateful you came on and that you had the time today and that you have this spiffy new computer. Yeah,
me too. Thank you for having me. And like I was saying earlier, I'm going to try and start broadcasting more. I'll probably use apps to do my broadcasting. I like it pretty much. I just got to figure out exactly how to use it.
The way you share videos and things, there's a button at the bottom where it says mic, camera, presenting, mic, camera, exit. The presenting button somebody taught me that, and it changed my world.
I
Brings
put
up
something
the
up
tax.
there to present. I see it. I don't know if you see it, but it won't let me put it up.
Oh, yeah. I just have to click on it. There we go.
Oh, you have to
Sorry,
click on
Brian, I
it to
hadn't
show
seen.
it.
I have to click on it. Yeah, because I'm
Okay, yeah, that was Maslow's.
Maslow's pyramid. There you go. Safety is very important there.
Yeah, safety is within your basic needs.
Yep.
So
Oh yeah, I'll get us out of the screen for a second just to
Yeah.
make that more. There we go. Basic needs, physiological needs, and safety needs. So when Republicans feel that all the Pentagon expenditure is critical to safety, then it becomes more politically intractable to recommend not spending quite as much on the Pentagon. But I think somebody smart could probably do it. If you got Pete Buttigieg and said, this is your task to try and gradually sell the public, sell the Fox viewing audience on the idea of maybe diverting some of that Pentagon millions into Veterans Affairs. Because I'm sure that when people always go, oh, yes, we need all that money still going to the Pentagon, they assume some of that is going to the flip side of military involvement, which is taking care of the people who did the work. That's part of recruitment, really. How can you recruit to the military if you can't show that you take good care of the people who served in the military? So if somebody with good political chops could take that on as a task, I think something could change, and America could conserve some of its masses of military expenditure by appropriately spending it on the people component, not just while they serve, but still within that cycle of the post-service period. So that's my dream for the United States. But in the interim, good luck with that expenditure bill and getting Manchin to hurry up with his little performative Republican conciliatory tap dance that he feels compelled to do every time because of the state he represents and the psychological composition, the political composition of people who live there. As for Kirsten Sinema, I don't know what excuse she has to oppose democratic things, because Arizona is clearly far more purpley than Western Virginia. So I think she's just become maybe a little bit addicted to the self-importance of getting to talk to Mitch McConnell as if she's a player. She looked at Mitch McConnell like, look at me as I'm going to go vote down that $15 minimum wage part of the previous COVID relief bill. Look, the world continues to turn without that part of the bill, but it would have been a nice psychological boost to all the people who do work in low wage jobs, extremely low wage jobs. Are you ready to go to the swimming, darling? You're still getting your toys? Okay, how about you play for 5 more minutes and I'll go start getting dressed in my swimmers. Thank you for sharing Maslow's hierarchy of need, Brian. Very timely to our conversation. And I already thanked you for appearing today. I will thank now our audience. Thank you, Marsha, Sheldon, Alan, Cosmic Rose. Don't worry about coming in late, Marsha. I'm sorry I always broadcast so late. In the meantime, Cosmic Rose is asking, please suggest that people push this to YouTube. Oh, if you're watching on YouTube and you click like, that will boost the algorithm. If you're watching on Twitter and you share it on Twitter, or you see a post promoting this broadcast on Twitter and you share that, that's helpful. Everything's helpful. If you found value in this conversation today, promote it. If you want to push me to get better internet access, with any luck, I will in June when we move to the States, which we still intend to do in June, hoping that Massachusetts continues. Well, it hasn't been doing very well lately, actually. Massachusetts has a bit of a case surge at the moment. So that's discouraging for our plans to move to the US. But go on, Massachusetts, do better. Oh, Brian, it says, suggest Brian push his broadcast too. He will. He's going to start. So I guess we can tell him your screen name, Brian. for when you do broadcast from HAPS. It's still going to be BC Nurse, isn't it?
BC MERS, yeah.
BC Nurse.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to have to create a YouTube just for broadcasting with that name. I don't have that yet. So I'll have to figure out how to do that and then tie it into HAPS directly. It didn't seem too hard because I actually tied Twitter Live into mine and Periscope before Periscope died.
Yes, Periscope died. I've just noticed we got a wave from somebody in New York. Ted Hicks said hello. And Jeff said, finally, you're live with Dav. The times managed to cross over. So I'm very happy for you, Jeff, that you managed. I managed to present at a Jeff appropriate time. This is good. I can catch more flies with honey and I can catch more audience with earlier broadcasts that are better suited to American wake-sleep schedules. So thanks for the positive reinforcement. Take care, everybody. Namaste, shalom, au revoir, arrivederci, sayonara, ciao,
Aloha.
aloha. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.